are more about, the princess finding her handsome Prince Charming and so on. It's rare to find something about sisterly love. It's even more rare to find a snowman full of so many wise sayings. But speaking of wise sayings, St. Gregory the Theologian says, if anyone were to ask me what is the best thing in life, I would have to answer, friends. Gregory the Theologian was not your run-of-the-mill type of guy. He'd been educated in all of the arts of philosophy and all of the great teachers before him. He wrote many wise things, a great enlightener of his time. And he says this about friendship. In fact, if you don't take anything from this series except this, take this, that friendship can be an image of the divine. Friendship can be transformative. Friendship can be as close as we get to heaven's doorstep here on earth. In fact, Solomon the Wise says, one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I think a lot of people can attest to this. A lot of people have had a friend who was closer to them than family. A friend who looked out for them, who asked about them, who it would seem was almost like their own soul. Many of the fathers write, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, how they felt like their friend was like they were of one soul but in two bodies. Reminds me of a story I read while I was preparing and researching for this series about friendship. It talks about friends that go the distance with you. So there was this guy called Mark, a professional, who was into marathon running. And he had run several marathons throughout his life. Believe it or not, I used to run 10K 2 to 3 times a week. I know it's like hard to believe how quickly we fall out of shape. But so I can really relate to this. And he run several marathons. And his best time was 3 hours and a half. And he really, really wanted to beat his best time. And he had tried several times and failed. So he decided he was going to try one more time because he was just getting too old for this. And he trained all summer long. And I don't know what's worse, training in the midsummer's heat or not achieving your goal. 3.5 hours might sound like a long time, but it's to run 26.6 miles. The world record stands at 2 hours and 10 minutes. So, for sure, professional runners can run faster than that. But 3.5 hours for a marathon, that's a pretty good time. He trained and he trained and he trained. He trained till his legs would burn and his knees would wobble. And finally, race day came. On the race day, he had his whole family there backing him up. They were on bicycles. They were he was gonna run, and they were gonna cheer him along as he goes. But this time, he did something different. He asked his best friend if he would meet him at the 25-mile mark and run that last part with him. He asked his friend Don. Don had run his own race that morning. He had run the 10-mile run, and he was exhausted. And as Mark was running, he got to that point where he hit the wall, where amateur runners start to compile reasons why they should just quit, why they'll never succeed, while everything in your body is telling you you can't do this. But Mark was a seasoned runner, so he just pushed himself through that. And as he got to the 22-mile mark, he started to feel the fatigue beyond his wildest imagination. Maybe he had gotten old. Maybe he hadn't trained hard enough. Maybe and all of these thoughts racing through his mind. And there he was, at the 25-mile mark, exhausted, covered in sweat, tired himself, Don, standing, hands on his knees, waiting. And as he saw Mark, he started picking up the pace. And then he turned to Mark's wife at the bicycle and asked, "How's Don doing? How's Mark doing?" And his wife answers, "Not doing well. It's about 15 seconds behind, and I don't think he's going to make it." Don pays no attention and starts running. As Mark meets him, he picks up the pace. "Hey Mark, how's it going?" He goes, Good. And they're both out of breath pretty quickly. Mark finally asks the question, "How am I doing, Don?" Don looks at him and he says, "You've slowed down a little, but you can do it. We can do this together." And together, they push each other. And finally, Mark finishes the race one step ahead of his coach with a 3 hour, 29 and 50-second time. And he beats his time on the last marathon that he chooses to run. Friends go the distance. Friends are willing to go the distance with you, even if they're tired. There's a lot of examples of that for us in the church, and a lot of examples for us, of course, outside. If you look in the Old Testament, you find David and Jonathan. David and Jonathan were remarkable people. They kind of met, and they just hit it off right at the first go. And Jonathan, who was the son of the king, goes to David, who was a poor shepherd boy, now soldier in the army, just a footman, just infantry, nothing special. He just loves this guy. He gives him his shield, he gives him his bow, he gives him his sword, and he tells him, "You are to me of more value than women." He says he loves him more than he loves women. Of course, some people have questioned whether there was any kind of same-sex attraction here, if there was any kind of erotic desires, but there's nothing in Scripture to suggest that, although it was very prevalent at the time, so it would have been very easy for them to write about it. A man who loves his friend, like he says, as his own soul. In the New Testament, we find the example of St. John Chrysostom. Actually, many of the fathers had friendships like this. And St. Olympia. She was a nun, he was the patriarch, and they developed a friendship. When you read the letters between St. John and St. Olympia, you see, he says, "I long for you in the Lord." The language he uses, albeit what we know historically, would really let you to think the degree of fervor of the words that he uses would strongly suggest a deep, deep relationship. More contemporary in the church, a couple of patriarchs ago was Pope Cyril VI and St. Nina, pictured here together. St. Nina was a martyr in the 5th century, I believe, and Pope Cyril died in the 1970s. And he had a deep, deep friendship with him. Doesn't really project that well. This picture was taken, and I'm always a little skeptical of these things, but they say that you can see the face of St. Nina up there on the brickwork, and his hands here that just appeared in the picture. Pope Cyril had a real and living relationship with this guy that had died 1,200 years, can't do the math, but several hundred years, 1,500 years prior to his time. He developed that relationship. Jesus himself had friends, and his friends, he says of them in John 15, "Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." And that's what's so remarkable about Frozen as a movie, is because in Hollywood today, there is two things that are idealized, princess meets her Prince Charming, and then the hot, steamy wedding night, and then there is the altruistic love, like Mother Teresa and the like. But there seems to be nothing in between for us mere mortals. There seems to be nothing in between. And in fact, there is. That whole thing that's in between is the love that exists between friends. And that love is so precious. And in the eyes of God and the eyes of the church, is just as valuable, just as fervent and passionate as the other loves described. There's a great book by C.S. Lewis called The Four Loves, where he talks about this in a lot more detail. There's a fourth love, the love of affection, that isn't talked about much, and we're going to kind of not mention it too much more than that. Speaking of C.S. Lewis, he says the same thing. He says friendship is unnecessary. Like philosophy, like art, it has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things that gives value to survival. What would life be without friendship? Well, I can tell you one example of what life would be without friendship. Joyce Vincent was 38 years old around January 25th, 2006. She was found in her apartment by the UK London housing people because she had failed to pay rent and her arrears had caught up to her. Finally, when they opened the door and walked in, they found a landslide of mail and a stench in the apartment that was only comparable to the stench of the dumpsters that could be smelled just outside her apartment through the open windows. Heaps of letters, food in the fridge with expiry dates from 3 years ago, dating 2003, unopened Christmas presents that she had planned to send to people, and a skeleton on a couch. It's all that was left of her. For 3 years, this woman had died silently, with the television on and still flickering, and no one had asked to see where she was. What about the names of the people that were on the gifts that she was planning to send those to? Did they call and ask? No. Nobody did. The only way they could identify her was by looking at her teeth and at an old picture that she had in her house to identify that, yes, that's the person in the picture. She had resigned in 2001 from Ernest Young and took up housing in the shelter for victims of domestic violence. Was finally placed in this city housing, then disappeared. And no one ever heard from her again. The problem is that friendship is undervalued. It's only dramatic examples like this that kind of capture our attention. But otherwise, friendship isn't making Hollywood screens. And frankly, it doesn't always make it onto my calendar either. The solution is really simple. George Eliot describes it. She writes, "Oh, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but to put them all out, just as they are, chaff and grain together, knowing that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keep what is worth keeping, and then, with the breath of kindness, blow the rest away." That's what a friend does. A friend doesn't judge us based on our merits. We've proven ourselves already. Our friends accept us as we are, and then see what they can make more of us. Why? Just because they're our friends. There's no more reason necessary than that. So let's get practical. What are we to do? What are we to do in this culture where friendship is so deeply undervalued, and yet is something so precious? We must do something. Sitting here and listening to a talk about it is a great start, but if we don't take something away, if we don't do something, we'd be foolish to think that our situation would be any different any time from now. I'm just going to suggest a few things that we can do. And they're all things that I try to do to the best of my ability. The first is appreciation. There's nothing that feels as good in this really special way when you get a word of appreciation, a word of kindness, which was unsolicited. When you call somebody and ask about them and you're not returning their call. When you send somebody a text message and you finish it with, "You don't need to reply," or you send an email and you put in big block letters in the subject, "Only reply if you have time." How many of us have a backlog of emails that we're waiting to reply to? And being let off the hook by the people who we love is just so precious. Every now and again, I'll stay up real late into the night, looking back through my emails and text messages to see who have I fallen out of touch with. Find 3 people that you've fallen out of touch with as you look back over time, and send them a quick word of appreciation. Thank you for being a good friend to me. Period. It's not hard, it's very easy to do. Why 3? I'll tell you why. Because one of them might not see it. One of them might be in just a phase of life which is too busy to do anything about it. And one of them will probably be able to rekindle that friendship that he once had. It's worth it. It's easy. It's quick. In our era of information technology, it's so easy to do. Stop, take the time, and reach out. Something else which makes our friendships so great is meekness. Meekness is one of those words that I never really understood, and when I understood it, I looked for any other word to use instead of it because no one else understands what it means, and I haven't found one. Meekness is this. You know when you step on somebody's toes, and then you only kind of say you're sorry a few minutes later, and they don't say anything. They just smile back. They don't seem to care. Meekness is being willing to take personal offense graciously, thinking only the best of the person who might have offended you. Meekness is so precious in friendship. Because as humans, come on, let's be honest, we're kind of like blunt objects a little bit, right? Sometimes we're a bit of a pinball in the pinball machine, and we're just knocking all over the place, hitting people left, right, and center. Your friends are the ones who will take it. They'll take it, because they know you have good days, and they know you have better days, and they know that on the days that aren't as good as they could be, that happens, and on the days that are the very best ever, you perform a lot better. St. Peter describes meekness like this. He says, "Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous." Simple words. Be meek. The last one is this, is that like roses early in the season, all you see is a bud and a bunch of thorns. all you see is something that could be a whole lot better, and a lot of things that are injurious, a lot of things that hurt. This is a quote that's from an unknown author that says, "The best way to keep your friendships alive is to bury the faults of your friends." If you see potential in a friend, if they hurt you, and if you're able to put it behind you, put it behind you for the sake of your friendship, for the sake of the peace and the joy that you had once amongst you. Imagine a world where your friends appreciate you all the time, where the first thing anyone said to you the first time they caught your gaze was "thank you for being you." Imagine a world where you never fell through the cracks, you never got forgotten by any of your friends. Imagine a world where no matter how dumb the things I do, my friends will be willing to forgive me. Another poet imagines that, and she says, "My only sketch or profile of heaven is a large blue sky, larger than the biggest I have seen in June, and in it are all my friends, every one of them." Glory be to God forever.